in many ways, the 14th sutra is my least favorite of the whole bunch. And the reason for that is that it just sounds so religious, which is, because I was raised a Catholic, part of my systemic allergy. But there is an important reason for looking at it. And I'll talk about that reason a little bit first, because it's something that I underemphasized, I felt like, in the last reading that we did. And that is that one of the important undertones of understanding that consciousness itself precedes everything. Understanding that our capacity to experience and understand anything rests in the preeminence of consciousness itself is sort of the bedrock of increasingly, interestingly, it is the bedrock of science itself. Now, this isn't, a universally shared perspective, but what is absolutely, definitely true is that the perspective that everything rests in consciousness is a growing perspective that since the 20s has been relentlessly, expanding its place, its importance in our world, the worldview of the science which underlies our civilization. Without consciousness, there is no experience. And consciousness cannot be explained even slightly as a biochemical effect of the existence of our brain. And interestingly, there are people, serious people, with serious scientific background who will argue that, in fact, we cannot be confident that even the brain itself exists. There are serious people who argue that we cannot be confident that even the brain itself actually exists. No. See, what that you can see and touch it, that's like saying you can see and touch this table. We have the idea, and what you're expressing again is the power of the notion that our mind is in our body, when in fact, whatever it is that is our mind, is informing us of our body, and it precedes our body. And what he's arguing is that everything about our physical form is really, it rests in a picture which is presented to us, in our mind, which is distinct from our brain. And that picture that we are informed may have absolutely no reality whatsoever. Right. the matrix is much more extraordinary than we're capable of appreciating. Okay, so, but this isn't what I want to talk about exactly. I don't mind talking about it, but what I want to talk about is that if there is only consciousness itself, and that is a absolute non-duality. It is so important for us to consider and relentlessly try to engage a positive mindset. And I'm not talking about being delusionally positive. I should put it, actually, it occurs to me to put this in a more refined fashion. We have to be relentlessly open. Relentlessly open. And that openness transcends the positive-negative duality. Relentlessly open, it sort of, in the most basic sense, I guess that means that we would actually try something like, say, snails or uni. You know what uni is, everybody? We might try it, and we might even find we try it with an openness that would allow us to find something positive about the experience. As people concerned about the truth and living in a circumstance in which we are preserving our energy to be able to hold space for the truth, it is essential that we ever more deeply engage from within ourselves an open state. An open state in which, in this circumstance, in which we honestly really don't know, and it's even possible that we cannot know, that knowing the truth of our circumstance is beyond the neural capacity of human beings, is extremely possible, then our response to this circumstance, which is at best frustrating and at least completely fucked up, our response has to be to engage it, to live in this situation that we are in with as much joy as humanly possible every single day. I think keeping our overhead extremely simple and our exposure to trauma, and disappointment extremely simple, so that we can move through this life, as open as possible and as free of the accumulation of the tensions and the traumas of others, so that as we age, we are in a place where we can be simple and joyous rather than processing the garbage. My point is here that I'm arguing that simplicity, I'm arguing that simplicity on every level is a pathway to a life that is sustainable, and a pathway to sweetness that is sustainable over a long period of time. And I am arguing that what I am saying, that in my personal experience, it is important for us to put our capacity to do healing work for ourselves. You know, it's important that we put that before, any worldly accomplishment whatsoever. Now, this may mean that we need to get educated in some fashion. That's why I'm encouraging you guys to get educated, because, with an education, you'll be able to have enough money that you can not kill yourself. You have to work 3 jobs and just be beat up by life and with no time at all to heal yourselves. But I am arguing that it's important for us to find our hearts and find our openness, the openness of our hearts through prayer and meditation and yoga practice. And then, it's important for us to find that simple good feeling. And then it's important for us to value that simple good feeling appropriately, so that, we are cultivating that and not anything else. Because the rest of this world, we do not know. We maybe cannot know the reality of anything about it. It's like I was sharing with Rock this morning, who was, as usual, appalled by the notion. I was sharing that I had seen a talk by Donald Hoffman, who was saying the first time he ever realized that everything that he experienced was not real was, it was when he was working on some equations with some of his colleagues, I think at MIT's Artificial Intelligence Lab, where he was a fellow, and I think then a faculty member. And he realized that the equations were telling him nothing was real. And he said it shook him so deeply just in that moment that he had to sit down. And, he had to really take it in. And it took him a while to get up again, and he realized that the implications of it was, he had worked his whole life for his academic achievement and his reputation and the financial benefits of all the above, his car and his house. And he realized all of that may not be real. And it was, it was a devastating experience. And, the guy still, he hasn't come down from that experience. He hasn't backed off of it. He is saying it is completely possible that nothing that we think is real, including the chair I'm sitting in or the table that you're leaning on, is not real. And he goes on to lay out a scenario, which was interesting to me because it helps me understand it helps me to refine my understanding of why we do sadhana. And we'll talk about that at a later date. Because I think preceding the understanding of why we do sadhana, it is necessary to understand the importance of having an open, tilted to the positive mindset about ourselves and our lives and the nature of our experience across the board. I would recommend that, you treasure more than anything the simple good feeling that is in your heart, which you can, through your practice of yoga and meditation, and simplicity in your material lives, treasure that and cultivate it and grow it so that as you move through your days, you have the ability to find in everything that you experience a certain amount of wonder. It's possible for us to walk through this world and just be dazzled by it. If we're not some dimbo who thinks, that the bodhisattva ideal is a positive thing. I think the bodhisattva ideal was, the way that happened was that a bunch of monks are together. They're starving, a bunch of early Buddhist monks or early sadhus, I don't know where it came from. Could have been thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, way preceding Buddhism. That, people gathered together to do sadhana, and somebody had to be the dimbo that ran and got the food and got the water and got the wood and maybe treated the illnesses and the injuries and who negotiated with the neighbors and all of that stuff. And they sort of, because the guy was a dimbo, they patted him on the back and said, you're a bodhisattva, go for it, yay you. And that's what you end up, when you're trying to be in the middle of serving people, you end up as a bodhisattva. And I think personally, in retrospect, that's just a really dumb idea. Don't throw away or even give away the joy in your own heart for the sake of lifting anybody. Lift yourself. And if somebody else gets lifted through their contact with you, bravo. But don't let anybody else ever, sustain any contact that isn't supporting the upshift in your own heart. And it's not that you have to be cruel or hateful or anything, just say no thank you. No thank you. Because really there is nothing more important than that. And in this process of growing ourselves, it is transcending our physical condition and our physical circumstance and our physical condition and our mental and emotional circumstances. It is transcending that and living from an ever-expanding experience of the simple good feeling that resides, that is your core, that is the pathway through which your sadhana can be completely fulfilled. Our fulfillment begins with a simple good feeling, and it ends in the dissolution of our mind and our emotions and the delusion of this physical body and this material world. Bravo. May we all be dissolved in bliss. And it is dissolved in bliss that we transcend this delusion and become established in a network of conscious agency that is way beyond this body and this mind, and way beyond any kind of experience of this delusional world. This is a little bit hard to grok, and especially for those of you who aren't, over 65 and have enough social security to continue to exist. I mean, as long as we are dealing with the stresses that the world puts on us and the feelings of inadequacy that our social conditioning are constantly provoking, it's hard to grok this. But real yogis walk away from the world. It doesn't mean that we become ascetics or we live in caves or we walk around naked. It doesn't mean that at all. It's possible, and Utpaladeva in this very poem is going to argue, that anybody can do this, no matter what lifestyle it is they're engaged in. True yogis transcend, all of the stresses and find within themselves an open heart and an open mind that allows us to look behind the curtain of delusion and ask ourselves relentlessly, what the fuck is this? And find answers to those questions that lift our spirit, not crush it. Now I know this hasn't sounded like the most positive message that I started out to try to say to you. But I will argue again that it is really important for us to be positive, because that positiveness has to precede openness. Positiveness in our mind has to precede openness in our hearts. If we're negative in our head, our hearts aren't going to be open. And so being positive is important, and being positive in our minds, having a positive outlook, is what is going to be a first step toward the ability to understand and live in a world which is profoundly conscious, and a world in which everything that we think we see may not be there at all. It is necessary from this positiveness that we are kind and loving to one another, not judgmental and aggressive, that we're genuinely kind. Genuinely. And genuinely kind means that we don't talk kind and then think in ourselves, that fucking asshole. We have to be genuinely kind. We have to genuinely understand that each of us are in the same circumstance, having no ground underneath us to actually rely upon, and only ancestral trauma to shape the way we experience and the way we react to the world. We imagine and we're told that we have free will, but in fact, we are reacting to the world not from our free will, but we are reacting to, what we think we see from an ancestral trauma which completely, totally controls where and when and in what way we will react. Isn't that dazzling? Ouch. And the dynamic systems of ancestral trauma that we live from and live in are totally self-sustaining. So the things we engage and the things, that we reach out to, the things we react to and repel away from, all ancestral trauma. Not our choice. And so being genuinely kind is really important. Being genuinely respectful is the basis of kindness. It takes a big rewiring in our heads to get to that place. Because all of us are like, the big question there, and then under that is, how can you possibly manage the equitable distribution of resources in that kind of a circumstance? And definitely the 20% of the people who actually work here, who do the bulk of the work, are going to react to that statement, and immediately conceptualize the 80% of the people here who do less, because that's the history of our community. How do we manage our overhead and the distribution of resources? With as much kindness as we possibly can. And if it means we end up with nothing, so be it. Being respectful, being kind, being positive, being open, being willing to engage in contact, alignment, and flow, which is another way of saying being willing to share ourselves, is a pathway to an unfolding of our awareness, which will, if we persevere in it for a lifetime, which will reveal to us the source of the power of the energy, the power, the inspiration of our existence, and will reveal to us a ground where we can truly rest. A ground within our experience that is a place of true peace. It's an understanding that transcends this world and makes the whole struggle of living and dying look ridiculous. which is from the perspective of living and dying, a difficult thing to grok. When you're in the system of living and dying, it's difficult to grok. Having said all that, I will engage in reading you my least favorite text and poem here in this text and commenting about it. And it's the least favorite because it said, in the presence of my master, repository of the most magnificent wealth, let me relish the nectar of chanting glorifications again and again. We don't chant that much, and we don't chant that much because Rudy didn't like chanting. And Rudy didn't like chanting because he felt like it did not promote an appropriate amount of self-presence and attention to the flow of energy within ourselves and our life. He didn't like chanting because people just got absorbed in ecstasy. And he didn't think that was a good thing. And so we never moved in. Because of that, there was enough resistance to chanting always in our environment that it never really took hold as a regular feature of our lives. Minor, but not really. We were always way too serious. But there's a wonderful thing about chanting, and that is singing anything lifts our hearts. Singing anything. What's the ugliest part of our bodies? What's the ugliest part of our bodies? Some say your nose, others think your toes. I say it's your mind, your mind, your mind. See, we feel better already. In the presence of my master, repository of the most magnificent wealth, let me relish the nectar of chanting glorifications again and again. Yes. Let's do anything that lifts our hearts. Anything. May you be glorified, the one Rudra, the one Shiva, the great God, the great Lord, beloved of Parvati, firstborn of all the gods. Glorifying, appreciating, being grateful. That's always 100% of the time a good, a reliable pathway to an open mind, an open heart, and the experience of the simple good feeling that is ever present within you, which when appropriately cultivated becomes enormous joy. Profound joy. And the thing about this joy is that I don't know if I've said it before, I don't know if I made it clear. Within the feeling that is this joy, there is an intelligence. There is a vision that changes the shape of your brain and your mind. I'm saying this because I'm not arguing now the non-existence of it. For convenience sake, I'm saying it's there. But when we have this experience strongly, it literally changes the shape of our mind. And it becomes a perspective from which we have risen above all the limitations of our worldly life, the limitations of our ancestral trauma. And we see the world differently, and we approach it, with a capacity to resolve so many of the obstacles that ordinarily would confront us and completely bypass them and create from within ourselves, a joyous experience that is whatever it is, but it is always 100% of the time wonderful. I think back to, because the sort of the easiest and most exhilarating time in our lives was the Bloomington ashram, when, and the early ashram, when everything we did just turned to gold. Everything we did worked. And it worked, and it was really, honestly, I told you, the Tao restaurant that we made was so cool, and it was so cool that they're still writing about it in Bloomington 50 years later. It completely changed the landscape of Indiana and changed the way thousands, literally thousands, of Indiana people saw and experienced the world. Because, of course, food is just an incredible way to influence people's perspective. But the beauty of the place, the design of it, was just awesome. Good as anywhere. That was magic, because do you know how much we knew about making a restaurant? Here's how much we knew. I could make yogurt. That's how much we knew. We did not know shit. And we took over this place because it was bankrupt and had like 2 inches of scuzz on everything. But because there was a genuine, burning, positive, everything we touched was magic. And it was because a joy had risen up within me that I shared with others, which permeated our environment. And this joy had an intelligence to it. And they talk about all over the internet, manifestation, abundance, blah 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 blah. Man, I want to manifest my soulmate. I want to manifest my fortune. I can't speak to any of that. It all looks stupid to me. But what I can tell you is that if you can, and I mean this, if you can enter into a state of joy and hold it long enough that it changes the shape of your brain, you will have in your life more joy than you can possibly imagine. And that joy will translate into abundance in time as you value that joy and treasure it and hold it. And that's where the joy is, where the power of manifestation arises. I have in my heart the abundance that I require to live from. I don't need clothes. I don't need any. Actually, I have everything already, but even if I didn't have it, I don't need it. And everything beyond that abundance in my heart is an overflow that I'm grateful for and happy to share. So, where I digressed from the poem was to tell you again, there is an intelligence that permeates the joy that is within you. And that intelligence is going to completely fuck up your ability to like do the accounting and manage the overhead, because you're always going to be wanting to give it away. But if you can navigate those two, that paradigm, there is universes of enrichment that is present inside of you. May you be glorified, Lord of the three worlds, the material, the mental, emotional, and the unseen worlds, bearing on your forehead the unique third eye. The third eye in Shiva, and in general in the tantric tradition, symbolizes both the intention and the capacity to look behind the curtain constantly. It symbolizes an intense curiosity that is always peering behind the scenes into and raising the question, what's actually going on here? And to some degree or another, seeing what's going on there. This is a great quality of Shiva, that Shiva consciousness itself is constantly peering behind the dynamics to appreciate, the reality of what is happening and not our delusion. May you be glorified, who bear on your throat the mark of deadly poison, having swallowed the afflictions of the afflicted. Now, this blue mark on the throat of Shiva is exactly what I was talking about earlier when I said connecting with people and taking on their traumas. And, he is using this to refer back to the presence of his master, the repository of the most magnificent wealth. In your life, appreciate the people who have been a positive presence. And even if you discover to your great shock that they have pimples on their ass, or snot in their nose, focus on the value that they have contributed in your life, not the issues that they themselves have to confront every day. Right? So that we grow genuine respect for one another. And out of that genuine respect, we have genuine kindness. I think I said last week that I really don't like the word compassion, but I may not have said it. I don't know. I don't like the word compassion. I don't like the word compassion because what I think it generates is I think the word compassion promotes arrogance in the people who teach compassion as a quality of a spiritual person. I think the word compassion is a mistranslation that should have been of a word that should have been translated as respect. Because compassion, I drive by the bridge over there and I see that guy who hangs out around the bridge with the sign from time to time, and I have compassion for that poor fucker. No. He's not a poor fucker. He's a guy who's struggling to live his life in maybe the only way he knows how. I have to respect that is a living being who's making a conscious effort to rise to the occasion every day in whatever totally traumatized and contorted fashion that he does so. I can't see him as an unfortunate human being. I have to see him as a human being doing the work that has become available to him in his life to survive, period. And if I can find it in myself to drop some money in his bucket, I do. But do you understand what I'm saying? How much different the word respect is from compassion? It's important that we respect everybody and that we look out in the world and we see, in McKay's parking lot. Oh my God. The pain and suffering that moves through McKay's parking lot every day is heartbreaking. And it's okay to have our hearts broken by it. But what we really have to see is a catalog of, the responses to ancestral trauma. And in some sense, the relentlessness of the biology and the struggle to survive, and we have to appreciate that. We are not looking down on anybody. The more we establish ourselves in the experience of the preeminence and the all-pervasiveness of consciousness, we are looking up at the quantum foam, the tumult and the turmoil, the turbulence and the quantum foam, which has, given off this rainbow effect, in which the world we ourselves and the world we live in exists. We are not looking down on anybody. And the whole terminology of looking down upon is, is groupthink. The Buddhists like to tell themselves they're superior to everybody because they have compassion. Mostly in my heart, I say, fuck you and your compassion. I don't need it. I need respect for myself, for you, for all the people in McKay's parking lot. And that respect fosters genuine kindness. I struggle, you struggle. I mean, we are so blessed and so fortunate. And when we can, in simple ways, we can share our good fortune with others. Not to the degree that it costs you the experience of that simple good feeling that rests in your heart. May you be glorified, in whose hands the sharp trident of symbolic of the three powers of Icha, Jhana, and Kriya Shakti. Oh, the sharp trident of symbolic of the three powers. May you be glorified, whose most venerable lotus feet can fulfill a desire the moment it arises. Dust covers the emerging impulse and manifests its end. May you be glorified, whose transcendental form radiates manifold splendor. May you be glorified, whose forehead bears ashes, the dust of, the ashes of the incinerated universe, a symbol of his transcendence of beginnings and ends. That's what the ash signifies. The transcendence of beginnings and ends. And in a single tuft of whose hair flows the stream of Ganga. There is two symbolisms here. The stream of Ganga is the flow of creative energy within ourselves. But Ganga is the source of the washing away of every trauma and tension, what is the word? Well, I'll just say the washing away of every stain, every sin, every limitation. In other words, here, and it repeats again a little later in this, the term Ganga means, the source of our salvation. The source of the transformation of our life from a bizarre and somewhat bullshit experience to an experience which is ever increasingly overflowing with joy and then abundance. Ganga. When we're in India, we go to Ganga, which now, of course, is one of the most polluted fucking places in the whole earth, and you would never want to south of Hardwar, want to put your foot in it because you might lose a toe. Might just dissolve. It's so polluted. It's horrifying. But in the day, prior to say 1970, Ganga was, snow melt and completely a pure water, which sustained the entire, subcontinent, or at least the entire northern 2/3 of the Indian subcontinent. It was a source of life. And I remember the first time I ever went to Rishikesh. This was early in 1973. Sorry, it was early in June of 1973. Oh, I had to go to the Ganges and get all my tensions removed. So we go to the river outside Rishikesh, just on the south edge of town. And I take my clothes off and I step into the river. 1 step, 2 steps, oops, my foot takes a sudden sharp down, and I look down, and I had just stepped through the carcass of a dead water buffalo and had, rotting buffalo guts all over my leg. And which, of course, I had to laugh at. And I'm thinking, what is in the world is absolving about this experience? I think I was absolved of any delusion about any material experience ever doing anything for me. Salvation, any meaning that our lives might ever hold for us or anybody else, arises and flows from that simple good feeling in the core of our hearts. And no place else. Not in India, not in anywhere. It bugs me a little bit when my Indian friends tell me I need to go to India and do sadhana. Because there is no better place to do sadhana than the place you are right this very minute. And I'm not meaning Gold Beach, I'm meaning anywhere, wherever that is. May you be glorified, anointed with moonlight. Hell yes. Reflected in the vast ocean of milk. Now, this refers to a cosmology that was present in India, I don't know, prior to the turn of the millennia, in which it was thought that the world was churned out of an ocean of milk by, gods in a tug of war who took a mountain that was on the back of a turtle, and they used a big long snake as a string, and they churned up the whole ocean of milk until it became the butter of material existence. I'm not sure how I feel about that idea, but it's very charming. And for an early agrarian society, maybe that's totally fine. But what these guys imagined was that the world was in a plastic bubble. Maybe not plastic, I don't know. But it was a bubble, and they may be completely right. It was a bubble churned from a cauldron of milk by a higher intelligence which was intent on manifesting. And this bubble was surrounded by an ocean of milk. That means the Milky Way was, the substance from which this earth was churned up from. Oh, they may have in fact been onto something, but their metaphors were a little weak at the time. In any case, ocean of milk refers to whatever substance it is that this whole delusion has been churned up from. May you be glorified, O Lord, whose ornaments are snakes, dazzling with jewels begotten at your touch. May you be glorified, O worthy refuge of only the immortal crescent moon. Crescent moon is right before, well, it was an ornament of Shiva's that happens right before and right after the new moon, which is the period in the month which is sacred to Shaivas. May you be glorified, ever consecrated as the Lord of the universe with the waters of the Ganga. The flow, creative energy that is blissful is what is sacred about, it's what is sacred, period. That simple good feeling is sacredness. And our coming, they use the word sacred and sacred gatherings and sacred places and everything. The sacred place is in your heart. The sacred gathering is us coming together to bring that simple good feeling that rests in our hearts to one another in contact, alignment, and flow. That is the very definition of sacredness. This moment that we are sharing right now, and the moments that we do share here in the meditation room in Havan and in meditative practice, this is sacredness. When we sit at the table and whomever make food for us, that is sacred. We are sharing sacredness together. And this is something we have to really appreciate. Shiva is the wellspring of the Ganges, which flows out of the top of his head. And that Ganges is considered to be, sweet and pure and nectar, which is the very source of of sacredness and the salvation of humanity. Religious words that, I don't use a lot, but I am aware of. May you be glorified, the mere touch of whose feet has made sacred the entire bovine family. Holy cow. Another reason why I don't love this poem, but okay. May you be glorified who always appear at the gathering of devotees. May you be glorified who, through your own will, deceives fools by assuming ascetic disguise. May you be glorified, who enjoys the deserved propitious fortune of Gauri's embrace. And he's contrasting asceticism and, enjoying Gauri's embrace. And again, in this poem in a little bit, he's going to talk about the pain of asceticism. And basically his position here is that it is not necessary to be an ascetic, and it is not necessary to assume as a lifestyle, as a long-term lifestyle, any unnatural constraints. And in fact, the thrust of the entire effort, all 17 songs, is that rather than asceticism, we should engage in devotion. And our devotion at various times may take on various, appearances. Like it might be perfectly appropriate to engage in some kind of intense sadhana in order to protect or to even establish ourselves in the experience of that simple good feeling within ourselves. It may be that we have to withdraw from the world for a while and engage in retreat of some form or another. And that's okay. But asceticism as a lifestyle, he's arguing against. And, in many ways, he's agreeing with both the Buddhists and the Vedantins in saying that there is a moderate form of simplicity which is best suited to the expression of a profound spiritual understanding. How we get to that, there are a jillion different ways, but this is what he's arguing. And he's arguing that being in contact with the simple good feeling within yourself and breathing and activating and expressing that as devotion is the truest pathway to the ultimate awareness. He's also saying that any experience that helps you to dial up that simple good feeling, that experience of sacredness, any activity that helps you to dial up that experience of sacredness is a sacred activity. And so, that's why within the context of tantric sadhana, drugs and alcohol and, all kinds of, and every kind of food is totally, it is included. Music, dance, within the tantric pujas of the I'm going to throw some terms at you. The kaula kulas, the circles of practitioners who, follow the four transmissions that are considered kaula transmissions. Within that, their gatherings, the kula yaga, their gatherings included music and dance. They included wine and meat and fish. They included, ritual sex. And they would engage in these activities, on the night of the new moon. And this was, a time when they reestablished their sacred connections, their sacred bond, if you want to call it that, but really connection is the word because bond kind of implies a limitation. And there is sort of a limitation within, as we connect to our communities. But, they included this is a time when they reaffirmed and reestablished and recreated their bonds with their community and their lifestyle and their life purpose. which is saturated with sacredness. Some of this was in contrast to what it was strongly in contrast to what the social norms of the broader community were. And this was, intentional in two ways. It was intentional in the sense that it asserted the primacy of sacredness over every social constraint. And it also was asserting the importance of non-judgmentalness in our own minds. We're so programmed by our Judeo-Christian backgrounds, our Judeo-Christian Islamic backgrounds, that it's really difficult for us to escape all the judgments in our heads. And certainly in the world we exist in today, where you have just massive inequities and massive contention, it's difficult to escape all of this judgmentalism. But that was the intention behind the whole endeavor. To live in sacredness, to see every activity and that is natural to and pleases human beings as a sacred act, and to, without constraint, engage in sacredness. May you be glorified who delight in offerings drenched in the sentiment of devotion. Offerings are to be made drenched in the sentiment of devotion. May you be glorified, pleased with the singing and dancing of devotees drunk on your wine. Bravo. May you be glorified who brings about the birth and death of the powers of Brahma and the other lords of the gods. This refers to a complex cosmology that I'll talk about in a simple way at a later date. A cosmology that is completely consistent with the understanding that there are multiple conscious agents that arise from a simple and unified consciousness state. May you be glorified whose orders are carried out by the ranks of the lords of the universe. May you be glorified who have made manifest your grounding by placing your signet on each and everything in the world. May you be glorified, great Lord. May you be glorified who are without second when the will arises to create the three worlds. May you be glorified whose only assistant is Devi, treasury of all your powers. May you be glorified who permeate all the three worlds simultaneously, the primacy of consciousness. May you be glorified whose sound, Ishvara, is never despised even by fools. This sutra refers to the study of the alphabet. The Shaivas have this really interesting explanation of the alphabet that arises from the term. The alphabet arises from Vach, which is the most primal form of the goddess. The goddess, which is, both the breath of life and respiratory process and Vach at the same time, because sound and breath are mutually dependent in the two different primal forms of the goddess. breath and resonance being exactly the same thing. He's talking about this primal resonance. And the Shaivas have this interesting, study of the alphabet and an explanation of what the meaning of each letter, what the power of each letter and the meaning of each letter in the alphabet is. And certainly, and they've broken it into classes. Their alphabet is Sanskrit, and their letters are 52, which are also considered to be, the 8, divided into 8 forms, which are the 8 matrikas, the source of creation. And they would also argue that these letters are the very basis of the world, and in that sense, the exact same idea as in Genesis, 1, is in the beginning, God spoke the word, and the word was made flesh, meaning the word became the universe. The same idea is in Shaivism. And, the Shaivas didn't have measuring devices, but they had an explanation of the world that is consistent with, slightly different than, theoretical physicists today. And this explanation of the dual nature of reality, of its resonant and apparently material form, they used the alphabet as the basis of their inquiry. Because of course words accrete like quantum particles accrete and become the basis of this whole display. Resonances accrete as sounds, and sounds accrete as words, and words accrete as sentences and paragraphs, etc. And while they have enormous power to shape the way the world is, they are, in fact, completely temporary and nothing at all. Right? Like a particle is a wave and a thing at the same time, that is someplace and many places at the same time. A letter, a syllable, a word is something and nothing at the same time. So they have this inquiry that when I've engaged the material is reminiscent of reading theoretical physics, and some of the themes are exactly the same. Of course, their intention was to create a technology which awakened us to the fraudulent nature of our sensory experience and inspired us to look beyond our sensory experience and the whole structure of information that our brain was creating for us, to look beyond that, to find some deeper and more enduring perspective which would support the emergence of sacredness in us. This was their intention. Their intention was not to measure anything or develop any technology that might do anything. Their idea was that rather than create ever more increasingly burdensome technology, they would create a technology which would float us right out of all this, this cesspool into a heavenly experience. That technology was the mantra. Mantra is the technology. And all mantras, rest in this particular theoretical framework. Like, the Maha Tripura Sundari mantra, which I have given to you all. rests in the theoretical framework, which is the Shaiva etymology. May you be glorified, whose innate supremacy depends neither on compassion nor other virtues. May you be glorified, whose unique destructive powers destroy even the great death. Referring again to the transcendence of beginnings and ends. May you be glorified, unobstructed in bringing about universal annihilation. May you be glorified be glorified, the chanting of whose name is followed by 1,000 auspicious qualities. May you be glorified, who without the slightest effort gave away this ocean of nectar. May you be glorified, a moment of whose wrath sets the universe in flames. May you be glorified, the only lamp for worldly beings, blinded by the darkness of delusion. May you be glorified, O Supreme Person, ever awake in the midst of a sleeping world. May you be glorified, a partridge warbling in the mountain grove of my body. That's cute. May you be glorified, most excellent swan gliding through the skies of the minds of devotees. May you be glorified, Lord of the mountain of gold and other precious metals. May you be glorified, an inauspicious moon who descends like a meteor upon those who defy you. Ooh, ouch. The ultimate good and the ultimate destruction. May you be glorified, difficult of attainment for ascetics and gods pained by harsh austerities. May you be glorified, easily attainable by the community of devotees in every state. Here, again, as I pointed out he would, he's arguing against asceticism and the necessity for any kind of extreme discomfort as a pathway to accomplishment. And he is arguing that the real pathway to accomplishment is the engagement in the simple good feeling that resides in your heart, cultivated over and over and over again through a lifetime of devotion that lifts us, out of the life that we have been given, and lifts us, because the life we've been given, the life we have, is the life we have been given by the goddess. And it is the life that we have, the real life that we have to work from. And it is devotion that, heals our boat, that makes this life viable. And then it is devotion that lifts us and our life to a completely different plane of existence in which we are permeated with abundance and in which the revelation of the true nature of our reality becomes available. Devotion. Devotion becomes unconditional, is based in respect, expressed as kindness, cultivated as loyalty, and then unconditional love. Easily attainable through devotion, unattainable at all, according to him, by ascetics and gods who are engaged in harsh austerities. May you be glorified, who have made worthy of a stream of fortunes those who seek refuge in you. May you be glorified, whose only purpose is to lovingly care for those who have come to you. May you be glorified, outstanding as the one causative factor of creation, preservation, and destruction. May you be glorified, O great joy of Utpala, whose work is rendered as sheer delight through madness of devotion. May you be glorified, O worthy of devotion. May you be glorified, conqueror of birth, old age, and death. May you be glorified, O world patriarch. Glory, 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 O three-eyed Lord. That was 13 glories for a reason. 13 glories refer to the 12 kalis in the krama, plus the 13th kali, which is Kala Shankarshini, the whole. Ta-da! Okay, we finished this. Glory, 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 glory be, we did it again. And the whole idea of this is to appreciate the glory part. Is not that it's like the fundamentalist Christians want to like sing glory, sing the praises of God because God likes the praises of God. The God of the evangelical Christians has a weak ego and needs a lot of positive feedback. This is not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is in glorifying, in all of this, is to purify our minds and to reconnect with great appreciation and gratitude. The wellspring of sacredness which is flowing within us and manifesting as our life. Because Shiva, who's covered with ashes and has a third eye and a crescent moon in his head and a Ganges flowing and a bunch of poison in his throat, doesn't give a flying fuck about what we think. It is for our own benefit that we glorify and we lift ourselves. It is for our own benefit that we connect to that eternal, simple, good feeling that is within ourselves and immerse ourselves in that simple, good feeling for the sake of having our intelligence transformed and a vision of that ultimate reality emerging from within ourselves. Ta-da! Thank you for coming, everybody. Chris, thank you for coming. Thank you, everyone. It is wonderful to be with you. It's good that we, especially, in these crazy, difficult times, it's good that we remember the blessings that we have in our lives, the unusual and extraordinary quality of our life experience, and, hold at least for a few minutes some gratitude for it.